Both of the candidates, Verge Pinero and Rick Snyder, will be with us next hour. For now, it's Kelly Rossman, the Rossman Group, and we're listening to debate audio. This is the rebuttal after talking about how much sacrifice can public sector workers be asked. And here is the rebuttal by Rick Snyder.
Yeah, well, I want to give Verge credit. I mean, he's a great talker in terms of he gets several points in for every one I have a chance to respond to because of speed. That doesn't mean there's substance there. So that's one of those things we need to look at. In terms of Gateway and my success there, the success I had was due to the building of the company. That all happened before any jobs in the collapse of the company. The company went through extremely difficult economic times. What I got out of the company, actually, it's interesting. The mayor doesn't realize I used to set up 2 venture firms in our state. Most of those proceeds came back to build businesses in Michigan and create jobs in our state. And that's what we need to look to do in the future. It's about having success and taking that success to build the next success.
If I may have a quick follow-up. Mr. Snyder, will you follow Detroit Mayor Dave Bing's lead and forego your salary as governor?
Nolan, that's a very good question. I haven't answered that when people ask me for. I intend to make some sacrifice, and I should. That's only part of it. But the reason I haven't answered that question is I didn't want it to be viewed as pandering, that I didn't want people voting for me just because I said I wouldn't take a salary. So I will clearly take some major sacrifice because it's the right thing to do for our state.
And then Nolan Finley asked Verge Pinero if he was going to give up his salary if he's elected governor.
Well, you're kind of hilarious, Nolan. I'm not a multimillionaire like my opponent. I'm sure that I will cut my pay. As I said, I'll sacrifice along with the other state workers, but I can't simply reach into my pockets from years of corporate gains and stock shares that I've cashed in on. So no, I'll need a salary to support myself and my family.
Maybe he was a little embarrassed to say it, but it played right into his hands, didn't it?
Well, I think it did in terms of the everyman candidate. You know, this is, and you said it earlier, Michael Patrick, kind of a class war. And it's really unfortunate in many ways that it's being portrayed that way, because you have someone who's been extremely successful in business, and somehow that's a bad thing. That success is why Rick Snyder is so highly regarded by most of the business people in the state, and it is because he's been through good times and bad. He said something earlier in the debate, I think it was earlier in the debate, about, you know, he was born and raised in Battle Creek in a 900 square foot home. Well, that was the first time I'd heard the size of his home. Now, that's not a large abode. He came from working class.
Paid his own way through college,
yeah.
He said.
You know, and again, I think that if you look at the substantive differences between the two, they're not that significant, but there are dramatic, significant style differences.
Next question is about tax incentives. Here it is.
Okay, next question goes to Mr. Pinero first. For years, our chief strategy for creating jobs in Michigan has been to buy them with tax incentives, which is one of the things we're seeing with the very popular film credits right now. Is that the right approach? And if not, what other things would you do as governor to encourage business growth?
Well, I wish it was that we didn't need tax incentives. My opponent has taken kind of a philosophical approach, saying that we should do away with tax incentives. I disagree. I think that would be unilateral disarmament. I may not like the global economy that we're in. There's a lot of things I'd like to change about it, but it's where we are, and we have to compete and win for those jobs today. We're doing it in Lansing. So I believe it's a question of math and not of politics. If the economic incentives are working, we're going to use them. And we have used them very effectively to pull down $500 million in new investment in my city, 6,000 new jobs. It is working. As far as the film tax credits, I'd hate to pull the rug out from underneath them right now. I'm starting to see some real investments of infrastructure in our state, but we need to see those investments, and we need to look at the whole picture. We need to look at the actual dollars brought in, then the economic impact, the ripple effect, the small businesses that are being attracted, and so on. If it works financially, if it makes sense, we'll keep it. If it's not, we'll throw it out. We can't afford to be ideologically based in terms of biased one way or another about these things. If they're working, we keep them. If not, we throw them out.
Mr. Snyder, you've been a critic of the film tax credits. Would you keep them? And what other things would you do to try to create economic growth?
Well, let's talk about the incentives for a minute. And it is a math problem. And the math problem is you don't create jobs by buying people into our state and giving huge checks out to people. You create jobs by having free enterprise work. And you have free enterprise work by having the most level competitive playing field you start with. Why do we have these massive incentives? It's in large part because we have a broken tax and regulatory system. So instead of putting a Band-Aid on something, instead of addressing a symptom, let's fix the underlying issue. It is time to eliminate the Michigan business tax. It should be replaced with a flat 6% corporate income tax. Our regulatory environment's also messed up in this state. And as we get our act together, there should be much fewer needs for incentives in general. The incentives have largely been a political gimmick. The idea that we're going out to bring in a few large out-of-state companies here with massive incentives is not the answer. The comeback at Michigan are Michigan businesses
to strengthen and grow the businesses right here in our state. And I think there is some philosophical difference in terms of really doing things to attract the new sort of flavor of the month business versus what it is you do to help retain and grow the businesses that are already here. I hadn't noticed it last night in the debate, but I did notice it in the clip you ran when Verge said, I may not like the global economy. And I thought, wow, that's way more telling than I realized, because he doesn't really like it, nor does he really understand that competing on a global global marketplace is significantly different than the sort of scenario he paints most of the time.
Is it good to have a guy who wants to sort of build a little bit of a wall around Michigan? I guess we'll talk more about that
I'd say no.
when we get back. It's 14 before the hour. Kelly Rossman, Rossman Group, and Michael Patrick Shields.